Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, I am Dr. Ehsan Javed. We'll be continuing with the pelvic and hip and pelvic fractures. In part 1, we have gone through the fractures which are related to proximal femur, and today we'll be continuing with the fractures which are related to pelvis. And why? What is the importance of these fractures? Because in routine clinical practice, as you are about to finish your studies, when you start practicing with the patient, many of the times the low back pain or the pain which is around the hip joint or groin region may be of a pathology which is related to proximal femur or which is related to hip joint or pelvis. And normally the patient, they are having pain only in the area of the back pain or in the groin, and sometimes the physiotherapist may overlook that the possible causes of pain or referral of pain can be because of the pelvis and hip. So this is the importance of this area. We have already gone through the proximal femur. Today we'll continue with the pelvic fractures. As with the proximal fracture, the pelvis fractures, they may proximal femur fractures. We understood that in proximal femur fractures, the fractures may escape radiological detection because especially when the changes are very minor or the fracture is very minor, in this case the fracture may be overlooked, and there are large structure of bone, there is overlapping of bones, and these factors may lead to escape of or detect or inability to detect the pelvic fractures also. Then in patients with osteopenia or osteoporosis, where there is no history of fall or trauma, sometimes the fractures are again overlooked, and patient may be complaining of the low back pain, and patient is being treated for low back pain or a groin pain or a sacroiliac area pain, but actually the origin may be some pathological fracture of the pelvic region. So in considering the different types of fractures of pelvic region, there are pelvic insufficiency fractures, as with the insufficiency fractures around the hip joint. They are reported at an increase in frequency in individuals who have undergone irradiation. The patients who are on chemotherapy or who have undergone irradiation, they may be reported at a greater intensity. Typical locations of pelvic fractures are sacrum, the pubic bones, along with the subcapital, intertrochanteric, supraacetabular regions. So the typical fractures which are related to pelvic insufficiency, they can be in the region of sacrum, and when they are in the region of sacrum, they are called sacral insufficiency fractures. In addition, they can be subcapital. We understood about the proximal femoral fractures. Subcapital is a common area of fractures. Then intertrochanteric, then supraacetabular region fractures. They are all the pelvic insufficiency fractures. So first is sacral fractures. Sacral fractures again may escape detection, are increasingly being recognized as a source of low back pain in elderly patients due to osteopenia. The patient has osteopenia, the patient is osteoporotic, and what happens, there is gradual softening of the bones. It leads to sacral fractures. Normally there is no history of fall of trauma, or maybe there is history of fall of trauma within the house may be there, but it is not reported. Patient is complaining of low back pain and is being treated for, maybe the x-ray is done, the x-rays, the sacral fractures, they are not visible. Patient is kept treated for low back pain management. What happens, there is no outcome. So if the patient is not improving, if the patient's condition is not improving after multiple treatments, then you need to go for advanced imaging modalities to identify. So typical rule is, if within first 3 sessions or consecutive 3 sessions, if the symptoms of the patient are not improving, or they improve temporarily and then further again deteriorate, or there is a progressive deterioration of the patient's condition, progressive worsening of the patient pain, then you need to go for advanced imaging modalities to identify, especially if there is a advanced age and suspicion of osteopenia and osteoporosis in postmenopausal females, then you need to go for advanced imaging modalities. Sacral stress fractures, they are usually parallel sacral with the sacral side of the sacroiliac joint, and they are usually most detectable anteriorly. That means in an anterior-posterior radiograph, these fracture lines can be identified, and they are on the sacral component of the sacroiliac joint. There is an ilium component and there is a sacral component. So sacral fractures are evident in case of sacroiliac joint pain or a low back pain, which is again considered as origin of the lumbago or due to advanced degenerative changes of the spine. The sacral area of the sacroiliac joint may be having sacral fracture, and these are insufficiency fractures. So distant radiographic features, or the features which can be commonly found in case of these fractures, are not visible earlier in the course because the fracture has occurred, there is progressive deterioration. So earlier in the early stages of the disease, these features will not be visible on the X-ray. And what will be happening? Patient gets an X-ray, patient is reported as having no fracture and only the degenerative changes. Patient is being treated for these degenerative changes and low back pain. There is no improvement in the condition of the patient. Whenever patient walks, whenever patient does some strenuous work, complains of severe low back pain. So there is a possibility that the sacral fracture is being overlooked. And in the advanced stages, if a repeat X-ray is done, what will happen? Ill-defined lines of sclerosis. There will be sclerotic lines which are very ill-defined in nature. We'll have a look at these types of lesions in next coming X-rays of the region. Then there can be a focal cortical lucency which is surrounded by a sclerotic bone formation. There can be a localized lucent area of the cortical bone and it is surrounded by a sclerotic bone formation. So these are chronic changes which are associated with the fracture which was undiagnosed, but with the repeat X-ray after some time, what happens? These changes they start appearing on the X-ray. So as mentioned, there can be focal lucent areas which may be present, and in case if the advanced imaging modalities is done, you can easily identify a fracture which was not being shown on an X-ray. And I will try to use the laser pointer for this. So there can be lesions which are lucent in nature, and especially when you are considering the sacroiliac joint, the sacral component, not the ilium component, but in case of sacral component there can be lesions. And if the patient, if there is advanced imaging modality like CT scan, these lesions can easily be identified. And if contrast is used, we have studied that with contrast there will be enhancement of the pathological condition. So with contrast, what happens? There is increased uptake of contrast. Wherever there is a pathological condition, the contrast will enhance the condition. So next is again, these are different lesions which are lucent in nature, and they will indicate that patient is having a pelvic insufficiency fracture or a sacral insufficiency fracture, different modalities can be used. The MRI can be used, CT scan can be used, and they all lead to identification of these fracture lines, and these fracture lines or possible areas of pathology can be identified. So after pelvic insufficiency fracture, which may include the pelvic or which may include the sacrum, next common pathologies or common presentations in terms of radiography are hip dislocations. They are usually well demonstrated on a pelvic radiograph. Why? Because there is a cup and the femoral head is within the cup, and whenever there is dislocation of this femoral head, what happens, it can easily be identified on the X-ray. So there can be a central dislocation. What happens, as the femoral head, it goes into the acetabulum, it fractures the acetabulum, and this is identified as a central dislocation. Then there can be anterior dislocation, then there can be a posterior dislocation. So there are three common types of dislocation. One is central, one is anterior to the hip joint, and the third is posterior to the hip joint. So these three common dislocations of the hip joint may occur. In case of central dislocation, what happens? Femoral head impacts through the acetabulum from a fall on the side of the hip. What happens? Patient falls on the side of the hip, or the side of the hip, it is hit by a moving vehicle, a motorbike or some other moving object which comes and it crashes into the femoral head. What happens? There is an impact on the femoral component, it fractures the acetabulum, goes into the acetabulum. So this will be labeled as a central dislocation. It may be due to a blow to a greater trochanter. So either the patient falls on the side of the hip or there is a blow on the side of the hip. In both the cases, the femoral component will be pushed into the to the acetabular component, and this will cause the fracture, often accompanied by acetabular fracture, and this is commonly referred as central protrusio. The term in which there is a central dislocation of the femoral component along with the fracture of the acetabulum, it is known as central protrusio. Next is anterior hip dislocation. It occurs due to a violent injury that forces the hip into extension. So now what is happening? There is a violent injury, it forces the hip into extension, abduction and external rotation. So in relation to the hip joint, there is an extension, there is an abduction and there is an external rotation. So an injury that causes hip extension, hip abduction and hip external rotation into at the same time, it will lead to anterior hip dislocation. Then with this type of complication or with this type of dislocation, there can be compression of the femoral artery and femoral nerve. So how, I repeat, how the anterior dislocation occur? There is a combination of hip extension, hip abduction and external rotation, and as a result what can happen? There can be injury of the femoral artery or the femoral nerve. Next is posterior dislocation. Remember, we have gone through the central dislocation, then anterior dislocation, and now the posterior dislocation. They are most common type and often occur due to a force through the long axis of the femur when the hip is flexed. A person is in sitting position and the force impacts the knee, it travels through the long axis of the bone. We have understood that suppose if this is a long bone, what happens? At one end there is impact, the force it travels through long axis of the bone and affects the joint at the other end. So posterior dislocation, they occur when the distal femur is impacted by a vehicle dashboard. What happens? The person is driving a car, the car hits into some object or another car, the knee of the person, it strikes the dashboard, the force travels through long axis of the femur. What it will do, there posteriorly there is a hip joint, and what it will do, it will cause posterior dislocation of the hip joint. So there will be a posterior dislocation of the hip joint, and one mechanism can be when the knee with the hip in a flexed position, knee hits anteriorly to an object, and this force travels posteriorly, dislocates the hip joint. It may also occur from a blow posteriorly to the lumbopelvic complex while the lower extremity is stabilized. The other mechanism can be the person is in standing position and some posteriorly some force, or a bike or a moving vehicle or a moving object, a large moving object, it hits the posterior lumbopelvic complex, and now what happens, there will be anterior dislocation. So these are three different mechanisms of anterior dislocation. When the leg is on ground, lumbopelvic complex, it is hit, and once it is hit, it may cause anterior dislocation of the hip joint. Normally this anterior dislocation, when it is lumbopelvic component is hit by a force, it is accompanied by posterior acetabular rim fractures. So these are different indications of the dislocation of the hip in this X-ray. Right hip can be seen, which is, I will switch on the laser pointer. In this X-ray, what you can see that right hip joint is having a normal orientation, and you look at the left hip joint and you can easily identify that it is a dislocation, and again another view, a left hip joint posterior dislocation, whereas a left hip joint anterior dislocation can be easily identified. So as we mentioned, in case of different dislocation mechanisms, one mechanism can be the knee joint, it hits the dashboard, and the impact, it travels through the, if you look at the focus at the pointer, the force, it travels through the long axis of the bone, and it may cause posterior dislocation of the hip joint. And this is again a right normal hip joint. You compare it with the left side, you see that there is no fracture of the acetabulum, but there is a fracture of the acetabulum, and there is no fracture of the femoral component or femoral head, and femoral head has fractured the acetabulum, it moves into the acetabulum moves into the pelvis, and the condition is known as a central protrusio. We have just went through this term, and there is a central dislocation along with the fracture of the acetabulum. So these components can be there in case of dislocations of the hip joint. Next is slipped capital femoral epiphysis, SCFE. S is for slipped, C is for capital, F is for femoral, E is for epiphysis. It is most common in young adolescents and most frequent in males, because in adolescence the bones are in growing phase, and especially in males there is more physical activity as compared to females. So, and in addition, the aggravating factors or the precipitating factors of the condition can be rapid growth. A child that is into a rapid growth, rapid skeletal growth, there can be insufficiency, decreased blood supply, there can be decreased mechanical support or stabilization because of rapid growth. The muscles are not compensating at the same pace. What happens? There can be slipped capital femoral epiphysis. Additional factors can be obesity and increased physical loading. If the person or the child is obese but still physically active, into a lot of physical activity, this may lead to slipped femoral or slipped capital femoral epiphysis. The physial plate, it is obliquely oriented, it is not transverse. If it is transverse, what happens? There is loading and there is no change because the force is being transferred from one component to another component. But what happens? It is oblique in nature, and whenever there is an oblique in nature mechanism or an oblique or nature setting, what happens with the vertical force on a oblique component? There are two components, remember, because of the growth plate there are two components. If there is a vertical loading, jumping, obesity, in more weight, more physical demand, vertical loading, it will lead to slipping of one component over the other component because they are not transverse, they are oblique. And with the oblique, just like a slide, you are taking a slide, you always tend to slip when you are sitting at the platform which is flat, you never slide. So whenever there is an oblique orientation, oblique positioning, what happens? There is also a tendency to slide, and this is called slipped capital femoral epiphysis because it is obliquely oriented. The epiphysis slips posterior-medially. So what happens? There is loading, there is oblique arrangement, it slips medially. That means it goes towards the center and it slips posteriorly. So it can be medial and posterior, and it is evident on the radiograph. The epiphysis, it slips posteriorly, it slips medially, and this physis will appear wider and less distinct margins on the radiograph. There will be more wider presentation and less distinct margins. Bilateral occurrence is reported 20 to 50%, and again more common in males. From radiographic point of view, the view which can be used, or the radiography view in which this slippage is evident, it is called frog leg view. And there is in frog leg view, the hips are flexed and abduction, then there is flexion of the knees, and this causes the hips to open, and the pathology can be easily identified. So remember, to identify slipped capital femoral epiphysis, you need to advise the frog leg view to the radiographer. The radiographer will perform the frog leg view, and this pathology can be identified through frog leg view. The sensitivity of radiography is about 80%. It is a good sensitivity, and using both the AP view and the frog leg views, the sensitivity of identifying the slipped capital femoral epiphysis is around 80%. So these are radiographic presentations where this X-ray on the right side, it is identifying the frog leg view, and you can easily see that there is slipped capital femoral epiphysis. I will switch on the laser pointer for it. You can see that this is slipped capital femoral epiphysis, and again evident on another X-ray which is indicating a slipped capital femoral epiphysis, and you can actually see that there is a posterior and medial displacement. So whenever there is it will halt the growth of the bone, and as a result may lead to deformation or deformities of the hip joint. So next component is skeletal tumors and tumor-like lesions. There can be skeletal tumors, there can be tumor-like lesions. Pattern of bone destruction is one of the factor which will identify if there is an irregular pattern or regular pattern of bone destruction. It will help differentiate either it is a tumor or tumor-like condition. Then margins of the lesions, they are very important. Periosteal reactive changes with specific location, maybe a femur, maybe tibia, etc. A specific location. Matrix of lesion, what is the actual matrix of the lesion, how it is spreading, either it is narrow matrix or it is a wider matrix. Site is again important. It is a metaphysis, it is a diaphysis, or it is an epiphysis. So site is important. So these are all factors which combinedly, if observed, they will help us identify tumors or tumor-like conditions. They also depict the growth rate of the bone lesion. If the pattern of bone destruction is very rapid and is very large, there are large patches of bone destruction, margins of the lesion are very much rounded, and again matrix of the lesion is very rough, and on a larger scale the position of this abnormal presentation in relation to the site or in relation to the bone, which is very important. It is central. Within the center of the bone, it is either periosteal, more superficial, or it may be eccentric in nature. So all these factors, they help us identify the growth rate of the bone lesion. And matrix of the lesion, the location, the site, the position, they help us diagnose the condition. So these are skeletal tumor and tumor-like lesions. So these are different graphical, these are different radiographs which are actually demonstrating the tumor or tumor-like lesions. You can see that these abnormal pathologies can be easily identified. Sometimes they are not identified and they are only evident when the fracture occurs. Otherwise, different areas, there can be tibial lesions, there can be lesions of the distal femur, and as well as there can be other lesions. So all these radiographs, they are reflecting different types of lesions. It can be related to fibular head, it can be related to mid shaft of tibia, or maybe the proximal tibia can be involved, or the pelvis can be involved. So these all factors may lead to tumor or tumor-like lesion presentations. And in case of sacral neoplasms and osteoid ostiomas, they are more common. More oftenly, if there is a metastasis, they normally there is a metastasis from the lungs, from the breast, from the kidney, and prostate carcinoma. So the original or primary tumor is in the lungs, is in the kidneys, is in the breast, or in the prostate, and from there these tumor lesions, they metastasize and they go into the sacral, and they cause sacral neoplasms. Another condition is osteoid osteoma, which is a benign tumor. So osteoid osteoma, it is not a malignant tumor, it is a benign tumor. It can occur in any bone, but it frequently occurs the proximal femur. As we are talking of the pelvis and femoral component or hip component, so osteoid osteoma more commonly involve the proximal femur, more common in female, age between 7 to 25 years of age. Radiography, it reveals small oval shape or ovoid, lucent, bright defects within the bone, and there will be a surrounding sclerotic changes also. There will be cortical thickening also. MRI shows bone marrow edema and soft tissue mass effect changes, and there will be soft tissue swelling as well as bone swelling evident on the MRI. But in patients who are taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, what is happening? These drugs are suppressing, and these drugs are suppressing the presentation of swelling. So even on the X-ray or on the MRI, the swelling will not be evident. There will be less edema. But if the patient is not taking any anti-inflammatory medications, then there will be more swelling and more edema. So next two conditions that we will be covering are rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis. And again, rheumatoid arthritis is one of the common conditions for which the patients see a physical therapist, because the pathology has been, or the disease has been there for quite some time. It causes destruction of the bone, it causes destruction of the supportive connective tissues, and patient they present with pain, decreased range of motion, stiffness, and other factors also. So osteopenia of the femoral head because of the bone loss can be there, especially if the patient is on steroid therapy. With the rheumatoid arthritis, patient is on the immunosuppressant medications, patient is on the steroids, and with the steroids there can be suppression of the condition, but added disadvantages are there will be osteopenia, and there will be osteoporosis and osteopenia, and this will be evident on the X-ray or radiography. There will be loss of the cartilage in a concentric pattern, although early changes may be more at the superior aspect of the joint, causing a joint space narrowing. So there will be a concentric pattern of loss of joint space, and by concentric pattern we mean that there is an equal loss of joint space. In case of, we will be studying this effect in the next slide. In case of osteoarthritis, there is the weight bearing area and the joint space. In the weight bearing area it is more involved, whereas the other area may be open. In case of rheumatoid arthritis, there is a concentric pattern, all the joint space equally narrowed down, whereas in the initial cases there may be more superior aspect, but in advanced cases there is an equal narrowing of the space, whereas in osteoarthritis there can be only load bearing component can be with the narrowing of the space, remaining space can be open. Again, with the rheumatoid arthritis there is an concentric pattern of joint space narrowing. In advanced stages there will be the acetabulum, because of the softening of the pelvic bone, the acetabulum is pushed into the pelvis, and this will again be labeled as protusio acetabuli. There will be osteopenia of the femoral head, osteopenia of the acetabular component also. So this is an X-ray with advanced cases of rheumatoid arthritis, advanced changes of rheumatoid arthritis. Again, you can compare with the left hip joint. Still there is some less changes, whereas in case of right hip joint, the protusio acetabuli or acetabular protrusion, it has occurred. You can see or appreciate that acetabulum has been pushed into the pelvis, and there is a osteopenic changes can be seen also. So with the advanced cases of rheumatoid arthritis, in this case the only management which is possible is, if the condition allows, the condition of the remaining bone allows, is joint replacement. And again, with the joint replacement there is a large component which involves post-operative rehabilitation by the physical therapist. So as I mentioned before, the differentiating point between a rheumatoid arthritis and an Osteoarthritic conditions on radiograph is the findings which tend to provide, distinguish or differentiate between these two conditions. The joint space narrowing with the rheumatoid arthritis tends to be concentric, more equal joint space narrowing, whereas with the osteoarthritis more in the weight bearing portion of the articular surfaces. So this is a typical or a classical differentiating point between the osteoarthritis presentation and a rheumatoid arthritis presentation of the X-rays. So the effects of osteoarthritis of the changes or the effects of rheumatoid arthritis, they are evident in this AP radiograph, and the erosive changes can be seen, whereas there can be erosive changes also. There is a more concentric pattern of joint space narrowing. So totally it will reflect that the patient is having rheumatoid arthritis and there is a concentric pattern. So it is a busy slide, but there are certain important information that needs to be conveyed. Non-uniform superolateral joint space narrowing with osteoarthritis. Again, why superolateral? Why? Because there is more weight bearing in these area. So what will happen? There will be a non-uniform joint space narrowing with the osteoarthritis. Then subchondral sclerotic. Subchondral bone will reflect sclerotic changes on the radiography. Third is osteophyte formation, most frequently located at the medial femoral head and lateral acetabulum rim. Medial femoral head below the medial femoral head and below the lateral acetabulum, because there is a joint space narrowing, and this joint space narrowing will lead to joint space an effect which is known as bony buttressing. There is no new bone formation along these areas. So new bone formation along the medial aspect of the femoral neck, it is known as bony buttressing. It is the most singular criteria again, or an important criteria for diagnosing the osteoarthritis. Hallmark signs of osteoarthritis. Another hallmark sign is subchondral cyst formation. There are small cyst formation which will lead to hallmark classical presentation. Advanced osteoarthritis, it leads to remodeling of the acetabulum and the femoral head. The total joint is reshaped, it is destroyed, and there is remodeling of a non-functional femoral head and the acetabular component. So these advanced changes of the which are associated with the osteoarthritis of the hip joint can be seen here, and you can see that there are subchondral cyst formation. You can appreciate that there are subchondral cyst formation. Then there is osteophyte formation along the medial femoral component and lateral acetabular component. There is a joint space narrowing, again more superiorly because of the weight bearing component, and there is eventually what happens, there is a D-shaping or a mottled appearance of the femoral head. It starts D-shaping and starts mottling in appearance. So these are all the advanced changes of osteoarthritis. So we'll finish our topic till here. If you have any questions regarding this topic, we'll be discussing it with the interactive presentation. Thank you very much for joining.